The desert was silent beneath the cold breath of midnight. The kind of silence that feels alive, the kind that hums against the skin and whispers of things older than the earth itself. Lian Chen sat alone in the observatory, her eyes fixed on the glowing screens that painted her face in pale blue light. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she did not notice. She had stopped blinking, too afraid she might miss something. The signal had started as a flicker, a small rhythmic pulse buried in the noise of the stars. At first she thought it was interference, a fault in the equipment, or perhaps the echo of a satellite, but the pattern repeated again and again. Too precise, too perfect, the data rolled in like a heartbeat, soft and steady. Every interval exact, every frequency deliberate. It was not random, it was not natural, it was something else. She leaned closer, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the filters, isolating the signal, stripping away the noise, until only that haunting rhythm remained. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, then 5, a code. A message. Her mind raced as she counted again and again, and then she realized it was counting down. She whispered to herself, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. It cannot be, she said. No one could hear her, but the walls, the stars, maybe they could. A cold wind slipped through the cracked window, brushing her skin like the breath of something unseen. She sent the file to the network at once, and within minutes her console blinked, with replies across the globe, observatories from Japan to Chile, from Norway to South Africa, all confirming the same reading, the same impossible truth. The signal was real, it was not from Earth. By dawn, the story had broken. Every screen, every newsfeed, every channel spoke the same words. A message from the stars. The world watched as scientists debated, politicians argued, and believers prayed. No one could sleep that night, not the soldiers, not the children, not the leaders who pretended not to be afraid. Telescopes turned skyward, their glass eyes wide and unblinking, as the countdown continued. Lian sat again at her desk, surrounded by the hum of machines, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the signal. It felt alive, like it was aware of her watching it. The countdown had reached its final sequences, numbers that seemed to echo in her chest like thunder waiting to strike. She typed her notes, hand shaking. She wrote, "This is intentional, this is contact," and then she stopped because the pulse shifted for the first time. It changed its tone, rising higher, faster, as if something enormous was moving closer. Outside, the horizon flickered with strange lights. The stars dimmed, one by one, swallowed by a growing shadow. The radio crackled, the countdown stopped, and for a heartbeat there was silence deeper than death, and then a sound like the sky itself, inhaling the beginning of something vast and unknown. Lian looked up through the glass dome, her breath fogging the cold air, and whispered a single word that vanished into the dark: welcome. The morning after the signal ended, the world was not the same. Skies that once carried the warmth of the sun now seemed colder, heavier. People looked up more than they looked at each other, waiting, watching, wondering what would come next. For the first time in history, every nation stared in the same direction, and every telescope turned its glass eyes toward the Black Sea above. And a military command center beneath Colorado, a general stood with his jaw tight as screens flickered with data points and orbital readings. Something massive was approaching. The object moved against the natural flow of celestial mechanics, deliberate like a hunter moving through tall grass. Its size impossible, its heat signature faint, as though it absorbed light rather than reflected it. Someone whispered that it was slowing down across the world. In Tokyo, in Moscow, in Cairo, in Lagos, scientists and soldiers alike forgot to breathe as the images came through from the satellite feeds. The object stretched across space like a city wrapped in shadow, its surface smooth and seamless, its edges sharp like a blade made from the night itself. People gathered in streets, pointing at the faint dark line crossing the morning sky, a wound against the blue. The networks went mad, broadcasters tripping over words as they described what no language could define. It was not a meteor, not a comet, not any ship built by human hands. It glided across the heavens with quiet authority and stopped in orbit above Earth. No sound, no broadcast, no declaration. Just silence, the kind that pressed against the chest and made hearts beat fast. Lian Chen watched from the observatory, her reflection trembling in the glass dome as the object eclipsed the sun. For a brief, terrible moment, day turned to night. Birds fell silent. The wind stopped. She whispered to no one, "This is it, they have arrived." Her voice cracked like glass. In the ocean's tides shifted violently, as if pulled by an unseen force. Satellites lost signal one by one, their circuits fried by a field that seemed to hum with invisible energy on the ground. Power grids failed across continents. People screamed as lights went out and the world was swallowed by electric darkness for a heartbeat. It felt as if the planet itself held still, waiting for something ancient to wake them. From the edge of the black horizon came a single beam of pale light, not a weapon, not fire, but illumination cutting through clouds, tracing rivers and mountains, as though the newcomers were scanning the world, measuring it, mapping it, learning it. The beam touched every continent before vanishing, as suddenly as it came, leaving only the faint shimmer of auroras, rippling across the equator. Governments sent messages of peace, of surrender, of curiosity. None were answered. The airwaves were empty, the stars were watching, and above the dying hum of the last radio, Lian sat with her hand over her heart and whispered, "They are not coming to talk." And far above the clouds, the ship rotated once, a slow, deliberate motion, like a nod, like acknowledgement. The sky itself seemed to breathe, and Earth waited in awe and in fear for the next sound, the next light, the next act of whatever had just arrived. In the frozen silence of orbit, the great vessel drifted above Earth, a silent mountain of black metal and shadow. Its presence alone enough to bend the light around it. No message came, no sign of hostility, only that patient stillness that seemed to weigh on the air below. The nations of Earth waited and watched and whispered to themselves that maybe it meant no harm. Maybe it was waiting for us to speak first. Inside the Defense Command complex, buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, the air was thick with sweat and fear. Screens flickered with heat maps and orbital scans. Technicians moved like ghosts, their eyes wide, their voices shaking as they read out telemetry data from satellites that barely functioned under the strange electromagnetic pressure. One officer barked orders, another whispered a prayer. No one knew what the right decision was. One of the monitors, the alien ship shifted position by a fraction of a degree. It was enough to trigger every automated defense system in orbit, a chain reaction of red alerts blaring through bunkers and silos, a countdown flashing across screens, fire authorization pending, confirm. Override, 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 but the signal jammed in the confusion. A single radar officer saw what he thought was a missile launch from the alien craft. It was not, it was only the reflection of the sun across the hull, but by the time anyone realized, it was too late. A missile streaked upward from a launch platform in the Pacific, carving a line of fire through the dark clouds. People across Asia saw it and screamed, thinking the war had begun. The rocket climbed higher and higher, engines roaring, until it disappeared into the black. Then for a long, terrible moment there was nothing, only the sound of air trembling, and then the explosion lit the night like a second sun. The shockwave rippled across the atmosphere. Instruments failed, satellites burned in their orbits. The alien ship flared with blinding white light as the warhead struck its surface. For one impossible instant, it looked as though the ship might fall. The light spread across its hull in rippling patterns like veins of fire, then dimmed and vanished, leaving only darkness again. But the silence that followed was not peace, it was judgment. In cities around the world, people fell to their knees watching the news feeds, the burning streak across the heavens, the talking heads shouting words like retaliation and containment and contact. Lost in noise, no one noticed the static that began to crawl through every screen. The faint hum, like a deep voice clearing its throat across the radio bands, came a sound that shook the world. Not a word at first, only a vibration that pressed into the bones. Then a voice, cold, calm, vast: "You have attacked the Threx Dominion. Prepare for annihilation." Then nothing, only static and the faint sound of thunder rolling across a sky that had forgotten how to rest. Lian Chen sat in the observatory, staring upward, tears streaming down her face as the stars began to vanish one by one behind moving shadows. She whispered into the dark, "We made a mistake." The world did not sleep that night. The stars themselves seemed to shudder as something vast stirred in the heavens. The Threx ship moved not with engines or fire, but with a silent pulse that rippled through the upper atmosphere. Clouds bent around invisible pressure waves, lightning danced without thunder across the skies. People ran into the streets shouting, crying, praying, as power grids failed and skies turned red over the Atlantic Ocean. A storm was born without warning, spiraling into a column of light that reached from the sea to the stars. Within that light, shapes moved, shifting, bending, merging until they became a fleet, thousands of vessels forming from the void itself, each one smooth black, glistening like oil, each one alive. The Threx had arrived, not as visitors but as executioners, in the command bunker of the United Nations. Emergency Council. The room buzzed with static and chaos. Generals argued, scientists screamed, diplomats begged for calm, as feeds from every corner of the world came in at once. Cities, burning skies, flashing oceans, boiling under strange waves. Nothing human could explain what was happening. A general slammed his fist against the table, shouting that humanity must fight, but the words sounded hollow against the roar of the unknown. From the observatory, Lian Chen watched through shattered glass as the night sky tore open. Beams of white fire struck the ground miles away, erasing mountains, turning them to glass, without heat, without flame, just pure force that folded matter itself. The air smelled of iron and ozone, the hum of the alien power echoing in her bones. It was not anger, she thought it was execution across the planet. The Threx unleashed their response, not with bombs or bullets, but with silence that burned entire cities to ash, soundless flashes swallowing everything that once had names, monuments. Vanished forests, turned to dust seas, hissed into steam. The world convulsed and screamed, and the stars above blinked cold and indifferent as though they had seen it all before. Yet amid the terror, something stirred in the hearts of those still breathing. A stubborn spark buried deep in the marrow of humankind. People refused to hide. Soldiers fought with rifles that could not reach the sky. Civilians carried wounded strangers through rubble, whispering promises they did not believe. Rescue teams dug through ash even as the air grew toxic. Across every ruin, someone still moved, someone still defied. The Dark Lion fell to her knees as the power lines around the observatory sparked and died. She looked up at the flickering lights of the alien fleet and whispered, "You could have asked, you could have spoken," but the sky did not answer. Only the deep hum of alien engines filled the silence, vibrating through her ribs like the sound of inevitability. The Threx did not speak again, they did not warn again. They simply watched and waited, as if expecting humanity to break, and when it did not, they began to understand. Too late, what kind of creature they had chosen to punish. The smoke of ruined cities curled into the gray sky, like the breath of dying gods. The world lay in silence, broken only by the faint cries of those who refused to stop breathing. Governments had fallen, armies scattered, leaders silenced by the weight of failure. Yet in the ashes, humanity did not vanish. It waited, it listened, it began to remember what it meant to fight. In the shattered streets of Berlin, a woman in a torn uniform lifted a fallen flag, not of a nation but of humanity. She tied it to a metal rod and planted it in the rubble. Others saw her through the haze, and something within them stirred. The air was thick with dust and grief, but also with defiance. Across continents, small groups began to form. No commands, no orders, just will. They moved through debris, pulling survivors from the ruins, using scraps of machines to build weapons from nothing. In the mountains of Peru, an engineer named Mateo carved a transmitter out of the remains of a crashed satellite. He sent signals, not for help, but for unification, messages that carried through static and fear. His words, simple and fierce. "We are not done." Across oceans, people answered in every language the same vow. "We are still here." The Threx did not understand resistance. They had seen countless worlds fall, their victims crushed under the weight of fear, but Earth was different. Humanity did not crumble. It adapted. Every loss became a lesson, every defeat a blueprint for vengeance. While alien drones scanned the ruins, humans learned their patterns, studied their flight paths, hacked their signals, and turned their technology against them. Lion Chen moved through the wreckage of her observatory, carrying a salvaged computer core filled with data from the first transmission. She found a group of survivors in the foothills, scientists, engineers, soldiers, and children. They called themselves the Silent Chorus, for they had no radios left, only whispers. Encouraged together, they began decoding the alien frequency, not to talk but to listen, to learn. Days turned 2 weeks. The skies remained dark, but below the surface, humanity began to grow teeth. Old factories came alive, powered by scavenged generators. Old ships were stripped for parts, old satellites repurposed into weapons. The world that had once been divided by borders was now bound by necessity. Nations meant nothing, survival meant everything. In the ruins of New York, a boy watched as his mother welded armor onto a truck, his eyes wide with something between fear and awe. When he asked her who they were fighting, she said, "Not aliens, not monsters. We are fighting extinction, and we have never lost that war." The Threx continued their silent orbit, watching, expecting surrender, but instead they saw lights flicker across the planet, small at first, then spreading like fire through dry grass. Humanity was not praying anymore. It was building, it was rising, it was awakening, and for the first time since the stars were born, the hunters felt something they had forgotten, the taste of uncertainty. The first true battle began, not in the sky but in the ruins of Delhi. where smoke rose from streets once filled with life. The air shimmered with heat from burning towers, and the scent of metal and dust clung to every breath. The Threx drones moved in silent formation, black wings slicing through the air like blades, their senses glowing cold blue. They expected to find chaos and surrender. Instead, they found traps from the shadows of the broken city. Humans waited hidden in tunnels carved from fallen buildings. Engineers had turned wrecked cars into bombs, old sewer systems into ambush corridors. When the first drone descended, it triggered the buried charges. The explosion ripped through the street, a wave of dust and fire that swallowed the machines in a roar of defiance. Before the dust even settled, the fighters moved quick, precise like ghosts, their weapons handmade, their hearts steady. The Threx responded with precision strikes, beams of silent light that cut through stone. But humans adapted faster than algorithms. They changed positions between pulses, using smoke mirrors and noise to confuse the alien sensors. Each fallen drone became a treasure, its parts stripped within minutes, its weapons studied, its circuits memorized. The aliens learned that every strike only made their enemy smarter. In London, survivors built a fortress from the bones of skyscrapers, barricades of steel and glass, bristling with salvaged energy cells stolen from downed Threx probes. Children carried messages between blocks. Runners moved through the sewers, their hands clutching maps drawn in ash above them. The sky burned red, but the city would not fall. They called themselves the Hollow Guard, and their motto was simple: no one dies alone. Leon Chen and the silent chorus transmitted new codes through hidden channels, broadcasting coordinates of safe zones and weak points in the alien patrol grids. They used the aliens' own frequency to mask their voices, and soon, across the planet, humanity spoke in a single rhythm, a whisper that grew into thunder. They cannot kill what will not stop. The Threx adapted, deploying new weapons, drones that screamed through the air, and beams that bent metal like paper. But the humans had learned too much. They hacked into Threx data relays, discovered how their targeting systems worked, and turned the machines against their masters. Entire squadrons of alien craft fell to earth, torn apart by their own fire. The ground shook with the fury of Savavlin. The forests of Canada fighters painted their faces with ash, and hunted drones with crossbows tipped in molten scrap. In the deserts of Egypt, old tanks rolled again, powered by stolen energy cores. The world was burning, but within that fire something wild was being forged, something unbreakable. The aliens began to hesitate, their precision dulled, their timing faltered, and in their cold minds a strange thought began to grow. What if these creatures could not be conquered? What if war was not their weakness, but their element? The resistance was no longer survival, it was evolution. Humanity was not defending Earth anymore, it was claiming it. Beneath the frozen wasteland of Siberia, the air was still and heavy with the scent of oil and cold metal. Snow drifted through the shattered ceiling of what was once a mining complex, now a fortress. Humans called it the Hollow Cradle. Inside its steel corridors, a captured Threx commander lay restrained, its body tall and thin, its skin like silver glass, eyes glowing dim blue. It had been taken alive during a failed strike on the Northern Resistance. The humans did not torture it, they showed it the world it had tried to burn. They showed it ruins and faces and memory screens filled with images of children laughing in bunkers, of soldiers carrying strangers through fire, of cities rebuilding in the dark. The alien did not speak at first. It only watched and listened as Lian Chen stood before it, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that weighed in her bones. She told it that humanity was not born for peace, that they had clawed their way from extinction over and over, long before the stars ever saw them. She played recordings of wars past, ancient battles fought with swords and fire and bombs. She showed it the scars of Hiroshima and the ruins of Stalingrad, the graves that stretched beyond horizons. She told it that pain was their teacher and death was their oldest companion. She said, "You thought we would beg, you thought we would hide, but you did not study us long enough to learn we do not know how to die quietly." The Threx commander watched in silence, its mind processing images faster than any human could. But somewhere within the patterns of logic, a crack began to form. It had been told that humans were primitive, fragile, chaotic, yet what it saw defied every rule of conquest. Every simulation that the Dominion had ever built it saw soldiers fighting without weapons, families rebuilding under bombardment, children smiling beneath ash and snow. It saw a creature that refused entropy outside. The storm howled against the ruins, wind carving lines into the snow. Like veins on the earth, resistance forces were gathering, their technology growing more advanced every week. Human scientists decoding alien weapons, turning them into tools of vengeance. The Threx learned that humanity was not adapting to survive. It was evolving to win. Lian stepped closer to the creature and whispered a question not meant to be answered. "Why do you think we made it this far?" she said. "We are not the strongest or the smartest. We are just the ones who never stop." And she turned off the lights, leaving the alien alone in darkness with the echoes of her words. Hours later, the commander sent a transmission into the void of space, a message intercepted by its own fleet, a warning, fragmented but clear. "These humans are not prey. They are the storm." For the first time in countless cycles, the Threx Dominion hesitated above the burning blue planet, their flawless logic shaken by something no data could explain, a truth that could not be measured by science or strategy, that war to humanity was not tragedy, it was instinct, alien cores, and human desperation. The resistance had grown into an army scattered across continents, yet connected through one pulse, one heartbeat, one shared rage. They called themselves the Union of Ash, and their purpose was simple: to take the war back to the skin. The desert of Nevada engineers worked inside the shells of ancient aircraft hangars, sparks flying as scavenged. Threx reactors hummed within the hulls of human ships, each vessel patched with steel and wire, and Lian Chen stood among them, her hands covered in grease, her eyes hollow with exhaustion but burning with focus around her pilots, prepared, not soldiers anymore, but survivors, each one carrying the memory of someone. They had lost the first fleet launched as the sun broke over the horizon. Their engines screamed like thunder, splitting the silence of a dead world. The Threx ships in orbit turned their sensors toward the rising swarm, and for the first time since the war began, they did not advance. They braced. The human ships were crude, untested, imperfect, but they flew straight into the black with no hesitation. The sky erupted in light and noise as the impossible happened. The first Threx cruiser fell to Earth, torn apart by missiles crafted from dismantled mining drills, its explosion painting the clouds in gold and blood. The humans cheered through static-filled cums, voices breaking with disbelief. The impossible was now real. They could kill the gods who had judged them. The Threx retaliated with pure fury, beams of energy tearing through the void, but the humans were already inside their formation, weaving through the chaos, guided not by logic but by instinct, by madness, by courage. In orbit, above the Pacific, a human pilot named Sarah Imani rammed her damaged ship into the core of a Threx battleship, shouting into the radio for her friends to finish the job. Her signal cut off in a burst of light. The explosion carved a halo around the Earth, and every surviving pilot whispered her name before diving back into the fight. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the Dominion fleet began to falter on the ground. The people watched, the sky lit with battle scars, streaks of light, tracing arcs of defiance. The radio waves filled with a single chant: "One more, one more, one more." It echoed through bunkers and ruins, through deserts and oceans. It became a rhythm that matched the pulse of the human heart. When the Threx command ship began to retreat through a collapsing wormhole, humanity did not stop. They followed with the fury of a world reborn. The fleet passed beyond the moon, beyond the cold of space, chasing vengeance through fire and gravity. The Dominion would learn the final lesson, that humans did not wait to be hunted. They hunted back. As Lian watched from the control tower, the Earth below glowing with fire and dawn, she whispered, not to the stars, but to the memory of those lost: "This is for all of us." And in the distance beyond the curve of the planet, the human fleet vanished into the dark, carrying with it the rage of an entire species. The retaliation had begun. The stars were burning when the Threx Dominion fell, their great fleet shattered across the void, wreckage drifting in silence, the echoes of war fading into the endless dark. What had begun as a purge had become extinction. The hunters had met the one prey that would not run, and now they were the ones fleeing across galaxies. The light of human engines chased them through the ruins of their empire on the Threx homeworld. The sky was red with the glow of burning towers, the once perfect cities carved from crystal and metal, now nothing but shards scattered across black stone. Human boots crushed alien soil for the first time. Soldiers walked through the ashes of a civilization that had never known defeat, their faces streaked with soot, their eyes empty but alive above them. The fleet hovered silent, waiting for orders that would not come. Lian Chen stood among them, her hair matted, her suit torn, the dust of two worlds clinging to her. She had not slept in days. Her voice cracked but steady as she spoke to the transmission array built from the remains of Threx technology. Her hands trembled as she keyed in the sequence that would carry their signal across the galaxy. This was not victory. She thought this was warning. The transmitter pulsed alive, its circuits humming with stolen power, and her voice carried into the endless night. "This is humanity of Earth," she said, her words raw and cold. "We did not want your war, but you brought it to us. You thought we would break. You thought fear would make us kneel. But fear made us remember what we are. We are the species that endures. We are the ones who rise again. We are the fire that will never go out." The message spread faster than light, echoing through the networks of 1,000 civilizations. Many who had once watched in silence now listened in awe. Others in terror. Across the stars, ships powered down, their weapons entire empires turned off their scanners, too afraid to be noticed. Some whispered that the humans were demons born from chaos. Others said they were gods of survival, but all agreed on one truth: never provoked them again. On Earth the fires had quieted, the skies cleared of ash, the oceans shimmered once more though scarred, and the people began to rebuild from dust, and memory cities rose again, not in triumph but in remembrance. Monuments of stone and light, carved with names that stretched for miles. Children played beneath the shadows of fallen ships, their laughter a sound more powerful than any weapon. Leon watched the sunrise from the broken observatory where it had all begun. The same desert, the same silence, only now the stars seemed closer. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind a single word: home. Somewhere deep in space, the final echo of her transmission reached the edge of the galaxy, carrying one last fragment of warning and truth. "Congratulations, you have just declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy." And the stars listened in silence, knowing that war would never mean the same thing again.